Welcome back. All right, so today we're going to talk about the Boston Bruins and my continuing series looking at teams that lost in the first round. And we're up to the first of 5 that lost in 7 in the first round. Very, very competitive first round, excellent first round. And yet there's still people saying, they should completely change the format for the playoffs. All right. Well, I think what we've learned in this year's playoffs is there's a lot of parity in the league, and here we are. The Boston Bruins were out in the first round after playing the Carolina Hurricanes, a matchup that honestly was pretty good in that if you're at home, you win. That's kind of how home ice advantage is supposed to work. So Game 7 absolutely worked for the Carolina Hurricanes. They win that game. And so for the Boston Bruins, there's a lot of questions. Starting with the jersey I'm wearing now, which is a Bergeron, does have the A on it. That's why I ended up getting it for a lot less than I otherwise would have paid because Ben had a bunch with A's on them. And then he got the captaincy. So it's one of those things that's why you see blank jerseys more often than you see ones with names on the back from most online sellers, except Full Moon Jerseys, who get theirs for cheap because guys get traded. So the Boston Bruins finished the season at 51-26-5. Excellent record, excellent season. Again, Carolina just ends up being a matchup that doesn't work for them this year. It worked for them the previous 2 times they met. We'll see if they meet again, right? So their April record was 9-6. They were playing well going into the playoffs. I didn't think they were playing spectacularly well, but they were playing well enough. And then they lost in round 1. So their playoff scoring leaders, Marchand, who had a very quiet finish to the regular season, had a very noisy postseason. 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. And again, Marchand, if he's misbehaving, that means the Boston Bruins are probably losing. And there were times where he was misbehaving during this series. Absolutely. Bergeron, 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points for him. Pastrnak, 3 goals and 3 assists for 6 points for Pasta. Coyle had 2 goals and 4 assists. Ends up with a pretty costly miss as well during that series. But really, in all honesty, you get as much out of Coyle as would be expected. And then McAvoy, who did miss a game, he ends up with 5 assists in that round. So the scoring is there, but it's very top-heavy for Boston. So their goaltending as well, there are some questions going forward about how you're going to make this work. And I'll talk about it when we get to here. So you've got Swayman, who's 3-2, 911 save percentage in the playoffs. Played very well. Ullmark, 0-2, 860 save percentage. Ullmark's numbers, ugly coming out of those first 2 games in Carolina. But as I've said, I don't think Swayman wins either of those games in Carolina. So I don't look at the fact they started Ullmark instead of Swayman as a reason why Boston loses this series. The regular season scoring leaders look very similar. You've got Marchand, 32 goals, 48 assists for 80 points. Pastrnak, 40 goals, 37 assists for 77 points. Bergeron, 25 goals, 40 assists for 65 points. Hall, 20 goals, 41 assists, 61 points. And there's McAvoy. So the only difference is Coyle for Hall. McAvoy ends up with 10 goals, 46 assists, 56 points. I often have or notice comments from Bruins fans asking why McAvoy doesn't get more consideration for the Norris. I don't think he scores enough points to get into the Norris conversation. And honestly, he is one of the better defensemen in the league. I don't really worry too much about Norris, this and that. Now, if you look at the goaltending records from the regular season, Ullmark, who had a remarkable final 6 weeks of the season, 26-10-2 with a 917 save percentage. Swayman had a rougher time of it down the stretch. He ends up 23-14-3 with a 914 save percentage. So again, the goaltending is good. Is it great? I think Swayman's got that potential. Ullmark, though, was solid after some rough starts here and there. But with the way things turned out in the playoffs, I still think Swayman's going to be the starter next year. Pending UFAs, this is where things get really interesting. You've got Bergeron, Lazar, Bleed, Josh Brown, and Froden. Now, none of those guys are going to require a ton of money to keep around. I'd like to see them keep Lazar. And with the name Bleed, he kind of belongs on the Bruins, doesn't he? That being said, if he ends up in Philly, Broad Street Bullies, Bleed, sure. But yeah, the one thing that's interesting is, according to Cap Friendly, with some extensions kicking in for guys like McAvoy and for Lindholm, of course, now they only have $2.3 million in cap space in the offseason. So signing Bergeron isn't just a matter of, hey, does he want to stay? It's a matter of you don't have enough money to pay Bergeron. So they're going to have to make some moves. They're going to have to make some room. And this is one of those awkward conversations where you have a team that is not, going to win a Stanley Cup this year. Didn't win one last year. And so it does feel like they're one of those teams that could fall off next year, and they don't really have much cap space in order to prevent that falling off, unless they decide to move, say, a guy like Ullmark, right? So again, and I'm saying just as a maybe if, due to cap hits, if you need to create cap space, might be one of those things that you do, right? So Boston could be an interesting one to watch in the offseason. RFA list, that's easy with Boston. There isn't one. The Boston Bruins, the RFA list, there's nobody there. This is a team that it does feel like a lot of their core is older. And so if you bring back Bergeron, how long do you bring him back? How much do you pay him? All that fun stuff. And he was really non-committal in the interview after the game, because it's an interview after a game. I always thought that's an odd thing. You just lose a game where you might be heartbroken, and Bergeron's a very competitive guy, so I'm sure that hits him pretty hard. And you give him, put a microphone in front of him and go, "Hey, so you're gonna leave the Bruins?" I don't know. We just lost our last game. Let me just take a minute to think it over. So, I'm honestly 50-50. And I say 50-50 on him coming back to Boston because we have seen guys end up with other teams that we could never have envisioned going to other teams. That it just looks wrong that they wear that other team's jersey. And so maybe Bergeron's going to do that next year. If Bergeron did hit the market, I would think that he'd be able to get probably a 3-year contract and probably a cap hit that would be, I'm not going to say extremely high, but considering he is one of the best two-way forwards that the game has seen for the last 30 years, and maybe ever, depending on how you view that two-way forward argument, there would be a bidding war for his services, I would think. All right, so over the last decade, we've seen Boston struggle to get out of the first or second round, and then they have the occasional run. So 2013, they had one of those runs. They lost in the final against Chicago in 6. It was a close series, but Chicago the better team. 2014, they lost in round 2 against Montreal in 7 because Montreal and Boston is a bad matchup for Boston. People who watch my historical videos would know that's a phrase that, it had real relevance for most of the NHL's history. 2015 and 2016, the Boston Bruins don't make the playoffs. 2017, they get in, they lose in the first round against Ottawa in 6. 2018, they lost in the second round against Tampa Bay. That was a 5-game series. 2019, they went on that incredible run. They ended up losing in Game 7 at home against the St. Louis Blues in Game 7. And then in 2020, they lost in round 2 against Tampa, and again it's in 5. And the series felt really, really similar between 2018 and 2020. Just the overall just feeling you have watching those games. 2021, they lost in the second round again in 6 against the New York Islanders. And then in 2022, they lost in the first round in 7, as I said, against the Carolina Hurricanes. The one thing is, this is a team that's now 11 years removed from their last Stanley Cup. And I don't think they're close to winning one soon. This is a team that every year it seems to be the same argument. They got to get scoring depth. Okay. They go out, they get guys, whether it's Craig Smith, whether it's Charlie Coyle, Taylor Hall, and they add these guys. And then in the postseason, it still looks like the depth just isn't where you want it to be. I think the defense is good. I'm looking forward to seeing what Lindholm can do. I do have like a minor tiny concern that picking up Lindholm and signing him to that extension, if it costs them Bergeron, could Bergeron on some level be to the Bruins what Pavelski's been to the Sharks? Could this be one of those things where you look and you say, yeah, they got Lindholm and he's a really good defenseman and it's a good long extension and McAvoy's there for a long time too, but they lost their number one center, and how do you replace that? So I do have some questions with Boston going forward. I do hope Don Sweeney figures this out and gets it all straightened out quickly. Which, if you're not a Boston fan, you're not hoping that they fix this quickly. You're not hoping they fix it at all. But we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happen upon this video. And if this was the final year for Bergeron as a Bruin, he had an incredible run, and I look forward to seeing 37 retired as soon as he's retired. All right, let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.